January 10, 1940. One of the largest leaks of military information from the Third Reich has just occurred. This was the well-known Mechelen Incident, in which a German plane landed in Belgium by mistake, carrying German invasion plans over the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Despite the efforts of the two German crew members to destroy said documentation, once they discovered that they were not in Germany, the entire German attack plan fell into enemy hands. This new campaign was planned to start just a week after this incident happened, but this serious mistake that Commander Helmut Rheinberger made forced the German plan to be changed and the offensive delayed. As paradoxical as history may be, thanks to this incident, which was considered catastrophic for the German High Command, the new plan executed in May turned out to be much more effective than the one the Germans had planned to launch in January. In any case, and as we have just said, this incident was considered something totally catastrophic at the time, and served to demand more responsibility in the future from officers who had documentation of this type. Although by that date it was already prohibited for any officer to fly with such important documentation, because he ran the risk of deviating from his course and falling into enemy hands, from then on the Germans began to be even more careful. Some measures that they focused on were further limiting the number of people knowing about future attack plans, or the prohibition of sending any sensitive information by radio or telegram. After all, for the future campaigns that were going to be launched against the Soviet Union, it was tried that the most important information, this being the final objectives of the operation, and the exact routes of the attack, were transmitted orally among the higher-ups. Subsequently, the units that would carry out the operation would be informed only a few hours before. With this last action that was already being carried out, the enemy was prevented from knowing the plan of attack in the interrogations of the prisoners who were captured in the daily skirmishes, or even the information that could come from the deserters. However, and despite the efforts made, this event happened again 2 years later, just a few days before the Germans began their second major offensive against the Soviet Union in 1942. As we have just commented, after this incident in January 1940, the Germans tried to increase their security measures in the face of the secrecy of their operations. Thus, in this new offensive in the summer of 1942, the German leader knew that victory or defeat was at stake in the war, for which reason he had given strict orders for absolute secrecy to be carried out regarding the new attack that they were preparing. This led to the fact that all orders related to Operation Blue had to be transmitted verbally, and under no circumstances was it allowed to issue written instructions. These precautions were not only taken on the Eastern Front, since the Berlin offices and command centers throughout the interior of Germany also had to act in the same way. It all started when on June 17, 1942, just 11 days before the start of the new German attack, General George Stumm, commander of the 40th Panzer Corps of the 6th Army, held a conference with his division commanders. In said meeting, he gave the corresponding orders orally for the execution of Operation Blue. During this conference, one of his commanders asked Stumm to write down some of the points so that he could analyze them more clearly, and despite the fact that it was forbidden, General Stumm made some notes in barely half a page detailing the most important movements. Furthermore, and not content with this, he had them transcribed and distributed to the headquarters of each division so that all the commanders were clear about his orders. Although this story could have ended here, fortunately or unfortunately for the Germans, as we are going to explain below, it did not. 2 days after this conference, and after the document was sent to all the barracks, on June 19, Commander Joachim Reichel, Chief of Operations of the 23rd Panzer Division, flew in an observation plane to reconnoiter the northeast from Kharkov, taking with him Stumm's written orders. Commander Reichel's plane flew behind enemy lines, and ended up being shot down by the Soviets. Thus, the wreckage of the crashed plane was found by a German patrol the next day, and they were able to confirm that there were 2 bodies next to the wreckage of the plane. Although these bodies were charred due to the accident, and they could not confirm that they were Commander Reichel and his pilot, it was clear that it was them, since they had disappeared the day before. After thoroughly investigating the area, they realized that everything had already been searched by the Soviets and that there was no trace of the documents that Commander Reichel had on him. This news was quickly sent to Hitler, who once again saw that his entire attack plan had been leaked to the enemy again, due to a totally reckless action. As we can imagine, this made the German leader furious, and his distrust in all those officers who did not follow orders increased again. And it is that with only 1 week left to start their great operation in the direction of the Caucasus, everything was prepared, and if they decided to cancel the operation, there was no time to plan something new during that summer. Although the commander who had imprudently blown up the attack plans on the Western Front in 1940 had been tried in absentia and sentenced to death, this time Commander Reichel had died on the spot and could not stand trial. This meant that in his place, General Stumm was tried for having distributed these documents to his different commanders. He was finally sentenced to jail, although Hermann Göring intervened for him, and he only suffered a transfer to North Africa, and placed himself under the orders of Erwin Rommel. In any case, the main question was what to do next in relation to the impending offensive. And it is that, and as you know, all the German efforts during the last months had been destined to make the Soviets believe that they were preparing a great attack on Moscow. This deception operation was called Operation Kreml, and it consisted of sending false information about concentrations of German troops near Moscow, reconnaissance flights announcing an imminent offensive, and all kinds of tricks. However, now, just a week after the attack began much further south, the document that Commander Reichel was carrying on the plane had just arrived in Moscow to be analyzed by the Soviet High Command. Although nothing seemed to make sense, since this flight had cost the lives of 2 German officers, Stalin finally thought that it was a new German deception action, whose purpose was to make them withdraw troops from Moscow and leave the capital defenseless. It was also forbidden for the Soviet generals to fly over enemy lines with the original plans of any offensive they were planning, and it was unthinkable that the Germans would have dared to do so, so the document was considered false. For their part, the Germans had no idea if Stalin had believed that the plans he had just captured were true or false, and they also did not know if he was going to take action and send more reinforcements to the south. Thus, the Germans had no choice but to carry on as if nothing had happened, and hope that the Soviets would not take action that could repulse their attack. In any case, history was repeating itself, although this time with no room for maneuver. As we can imagine, in the future any kind of new plan would be protected with greater control and security measures, having its highest moment in the preparation of the Ardennes offensive during the end of 1944. As we have already analyzed in other programs, all the planning of this last great German operation was carried out with great secrecy, and anyone who could leak any type of information by mistake was threatened with execution. In any case, and despite the effort made, the Allies had many indications that the Germans were preparing an offensive, although they decided to ignore it. It should be noted that no officer flew over the enemy lines on this occasion with all the plans of the operation. To tell the truth, during this battle it was the Germans who captured the plans for what the Allies were planning to do in Germany when the war was over. Well, what do you think? How do you value these 2 big mistakes that the Germans had in 2 of their most important operations? Do you know of another case similar to the ones we have just analyzed? I leave you in the description the program we did about Operation Azul with Juan Pastrana, where we analyzed everything in greater depth. Thank you all for being part of this community, and especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and we'll see each other here as always, next Thursday and Sunday. See you soon.